Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Karma Thegsum Chöling, Southern California. My name is Jody, and I am the director of our center here in California. We are so happy to have all of you joining us from many different locations and time zones as we come together in this digital but still sacred space. This evening, we're pleased to have Lama Adam back, continuing his series on the wings of compassion. Love and compassion. Please visit us online at ktcsocal.org and consider becoming a member. You are also able to make donations directly to our teachers as well. Each and every one of you on this Zoom call tonight is an important part of our Sangha. We relish in everyone's participation, whether you are a new or seasoned practitioner. Before I hand it over to Lama Adam, I ask that you all just put your microphones on mute so we don't hear any background noise. And now I hand it over to you, Lama Adam. We're very grateful for you being with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure, Max, is there more than one host? Because I feel like my connection's a little unstable. I want to make sure if I cut out, the meeting keeps running.
Yeah, I'm co-host. Actually, I'm host. I'm
okay,
and Jody's co-host, so you both are co-hosts. So
good.
One of us has something there.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a safety net.
Okay,
good deal.
That sounds good from your end. I mean, whatever the audio and everything sounds good, and the picture is super clean. So
good. Yeah, we've had some bad weather here. There's been like a number of tornado warnings, not right now, but over the last couple of days, and
oh well,
it's that time of year. So I'll share screen here, and we can do the refuge prayer to start. There we go. And we'll do one time in English, once in Tibetan, and once more in English. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. O Sangye Chidang Soki Chodnama Jangchu Padu Dagmi Kyapsuji Daki Jin Soki Pe Sunam Rola Penchi Sangye Drupasho. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And I'm going to say my own short prayer. This is actually a short practice of Guru Yoga, so that's one of the things we've been working with in this Lojong series. So if you want to do a short practice of Guru Yoga of your own, that would be appropriate now. Oh, Paden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Daki Jiwo Pede Jula Paden Chavo Goneje Sumpe Usum Dugi Ngujup Sadhu Som. Okay. First, I just want to say that was a really nice program last week. I was really happy to be here and really happy to see all the people who are here. And I've been in some weird health the last 2 weeks. I think we got to figure it out today. I think I have strep, which I don't think I've had since I was like in elementary school or middle school or something. But I'm feeling okay. I'm just like weak and my throat's a little funky, but I just got on antibiotics today. So I am a little foggy in general, but I feel like I'm doing better now. Before we dive into this stuff, I just wanted to say briefly like how much I've been enjoying digging into the science aspect of mindfulness and meditation. I think I've talked about it before. I've been really digging into this Healthy Minds program, which is developed by Richard Davidson, who you may know as one of the people that founded the Mind and Life Institute with the Dalai Lama. So they do these conferences. I think they still do them every year, but they do a conference where they get together. The Dalai Lama comes and joins and invites a bunch of scientists, and they kind of have a meeting where science meets the Dharma, and they talk about different topics each year. And it's really fascinating stuff. There's several, I think probably more than several books that have come out of these conferences, including books about sleep and dreams, and other topics like that. So I just shared this because I want to highlight again that like the Buddha didn't like invent a thing called Buddhism that we're all supposed to do. You know, that in fact the word Buddhism wasn't around until much later. The Buddha taught the Dharma, and the Dharma is the way things work, and that's testable. You know, like, and that's why the Buddha said, "Don't take my word for it. Test these teachings yourself." And so I've just been having more and more like kind of faith in that lately, especially since I've been using this Healthy Minds app that's developed by this Center for Healthy Minds, and I definitely recommend that. It's free. It's a really good program. The model they use is called flourishing. So the idea with flourishing is it's kind of like it's related to wellness or well-being. And it's helped me to recognize that in a lot of ways, the Buddha was like one of the first proponents of like wellness. You know, like when we talk about wellness now, which in a lot of ways is like resilience, you know, in the face of challenges, and being able to use our time and energy for growth, you know, and underpinning the things we do with motivation that is altruistic. Um, all of these things like the Buddha taught, and this is exactly what the Center for Healthy Minds and other scientists have found actually lead to lasting happiness. Big surprise to us Buddhists, right? But it's true. So I think it's interesting for me diving into this stuff because there are angles on the teachings and methods that I haven't necessarily received on the Dharma side of things. I don't think that means they're not there. The Dharma is full of methods, and we are in one lineage, and we only receive a certain percentage of those, and even different teachers teach things different ways. You know, so it's not to say it's lacking in the Dharma, but the way that the Center for Healthy Minds is systematized this stuff into 4 pillars is really interesting. They are awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. And awareness being the innate quality of just being aware. Like if someone asks you, "How are you feeling?" You know, we know. You know, and we may not notice, for instance, all the things that are blue in our room, but when I say it now, all of a sudden you notice all the things in your room that are blue. You know, so that awareness is there, but often we're distracted, or because of habit, we don't notice it. And so a lot of times we just need to be mindful of that awareness and bring our attention back to that awareness, reconnect with the innate quality of awareness, which is always there. So awareness is this first pillar. The second is connection, which is one of the core practices there is just appreciation. So I kind of thought of this in terms of like sort of like tong-len or metta, this idea of like connecting with good aspirations for people and things that we appreciate about people, gratitude, you know, doing simple practices of just thinking of someone that's meaningful to us, and really taking a moment to think about like why we appreciate them. You know, what are the details of like why we appreciate them? And furthermore, when we connect with that, connecting with like what happens in our body, how do we embody that gratitude or appreciation, what changes in the body? And when we notice that, can we put our attention there and let our attention rest on whatever that physical manifestation of gravity or of gratitude is? And then we have insight, which is not about intelligence, It's really about how we think, catching the patterns, our negative self-talk, or positive, but a lot of times it's more negative than positive, I think, for many of us. But insight is really just about, can we notice the things that keep happening in our life? And can we notice when we have a thought or emotion that is in fact a fleeting experience, whatever that is in the moment. It's not who we are. It doesn't define us, that thought or that emotion. And that's insight, when we can really be connected with that. And then the last pillar is purpose. And that is a kind of a bigger and more longer term process, according to them. And I think this also relates to the Dharma, because this process angle is about connecting with our deep why. Why are we doing the things we're doing? Not just like the big things. And purpose, I think, in a way, sounds like it has to be some big giant thing, and this, it's interesting. I'm just putting two and two together now. I think this is why a lot of times for me in the Dharma, I get hung up on the end goal point, of like enlightenment. And that becomes like kind of a fixation in a way on that one aspect of like this big giant goal and achieving that. Whereas there's another aspect, which is just like, when I am like vacuuming my floor, am I able to connect that to my deeper why? And the practice that they offer for that is like a rolling why. So like what they mean is like, if you're vacuuming the floor, you would ask yourself like, why am I doing this? And you might say like, well, because it's been a couple weeks and the floor is getting dirty. And so you don't stop there. You go, all right, well, why is it important when the floor gets dirty for me to clean it? And you say, well, I don't like walking around and stepping on dirt and things like that. And, it doesn't look good. And then you maybe ask, well, why is that? And say, well, I want, if people to come over, I want them to have a nice place to be. And it's like, there you're starting to connect, with the broader, more altruistic goal, and you can do this with everything. The idea is the first time you answer the question, it's probably going to be pretty superficial, and maybe the second too. But a couple asks of the question why will get you to the deeper, more altruistic why of the situation. And the more often you can be connected with that, the easier it is to enjoy the things you're doing, including the mundane things, or including the meditation. Getting up in the morning to do your practice becomes easier, when you're recalling again and again the why for your situation. And I think it makes total sense for the why to be to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. But the way we do that day to day also includes vacuuming the floor and brushing our teeth, and these things can and should be part of the path. And when we can kind of utilize all four of those pillars at any given time. When we're brushing our teeth, we can think, every day I brush my teeth. That's a good time for me to practice a little mindfulness, a little awareness. And so when we make the aspiration to do that, when we brush our teeth, then we remember, oh, I'm going to just be present with this. Perhaps like when we're feeling a little isolated or down, or the world seems a little harsh, then we think of someone we appreciate, or someone who's done something kind for us. Maybe it's one of our teachers, and we think of their kindness and recall like why that's important to us. And instead of going into the story of the situation or the narrative, our narrative, we can kind of, once we connect with why and how it manifests in the body, we can kind of just rest our attention on that feeling of gratitude and that embodiment of appreciation. And then insight, a lot of times is just kind of watching. I've been thinking about this a little bit in terms of like open awareness kinds of meditation, because in a way you're kind of just watching thoughts go by like train cars, and noticing things, noticing like, are my thoughts a lot of words, or are they like images, or how often thoughts are about myself, or the way I come across, or what people think of me, or how I do things. we don't have to get into why we think those types of things in this practice. We just notice, and if we catch ourselves trying to stop thinking or alter the thinking, we try to let go of that and just come back to the actual present moment experience. And I just think this is really fascinating because as I was using the app, and then I found they have an online course that is really good. It's called The Science of Flourishing. And it's I finished it in like a couple hours over a week. And I was just amazed how it was the Buddha's teaching, the whole course, like beginning to end. And they didn't talk about Buddhism at all, and I actually loved that, because that gave me so much more confidence in what we're doing, and the fact that other people can do it too, whether they're into, Buddhist iconography or not, whether they're like Tibetan Buddhist colors and deities or not, whether they're into Zen or not, like these teachings work, and there's now science that shows that. So I just wanted to share that because I think it aligns so much, and I think it has, for me, been a really, really good way to come at what we work with in these Buddhist teachings from another direction, and really see that this is not just like some idea that we're coming up with and trying to believe for no reason. We can test this stuff and we can see it, and people are testing it, and there's research behind it. And I'm sure now there is religious aspects to what we do too, and I can't say the same necessarily about those things, but but in terms of the actual practices and what we do in daily life, like science is pretty supportive of all of this. So I'm going to share screen once again, and we'll pick up. I'd like to just talk a little bit today about the four thoughts, because we started on those last time. And just to recap where we were at, I was giving the 3-step method of contemplation, which is when we contemplate, we start with a review, which is really examining material in a fresh way with curiosity. So I think it's always the case, unless it's the first or second time we're encountering an idea, we're coming in with some preconceived notions. But the idea really, if we're going to engage in a contemplative meditation, we want to really try to open up some curiosity. And curiosity also means like a little bit of like healthy doubt, a little bit of healthy questioning. So when we review, we're really kind of questioning these things. This isn't a process of contemplation or review is not a process of trying to generate as much confidence in the teaching before you do it. Like you want to come into it like, all right, you're coming into it with taking the Buddha's word that you should test it, And so that's the review step. And then at some point when we do a review, we will, I like to think of it as like kind of like something snaps into place. There's something that like, where something notches up a little bit. Like there's a little bit of like understanding that clicks, and you go, oh, yeah, that is true, and in that moment of recognition is oftentimes where we might get stuck in a rumination loop. But this is where that is kind of the pitfall that I want to warn against. What we actually want to do for that third step is to resolve. So after there's that recognition, no real need to hang out in the recognition zone. We go straight to the resolve zone. And the resolve zone is really always kind of the same, some variety of like, well, this is why I need to practice Dharma. And this is why I need to, not just now, but like figure out things like I talked about in the beginning. Like to me, part of the recognition part is not just like, oh, I really do need to meditate for an hour every morning. It's not just that. It's like, boy, I really need to figure out how this Dharma fits into everything I'm doing. I really need to figure out how I can make things applicable to my practice that may not apparently seem to be applicable. I need to ask those questions about why and how this connects throughout my whole day, not just in the time that I'm on the cushion. And I think everyone here is aware of the four thoughts: precious human birth, impermanence, karma, and the defects of samsara. And we're going to go through this contemplation companion that I made, which is based on Gampopa's jewel ornament presentation of the four thoughts. If anyone doesn't have it, you can scan the QR code, and that will take you to my website where you can download. I'll give just a sec for that. I'll have it on the screen while we talk too, but it'll be good if you download it, you can have it for your own use later. Everybody good? Good, good. Okay. So we started last time with the precious human birth, and this is broken down, like I said, like Gampopa did in the jewel ornament. And what I love about this is, to me, this is like the contemplation buffet. You know, this is the Old Town buffet of contemplation. You got a lot of choices. You don't always have to have the same thing, you know. And so really, like if you're using this on a daily basis, if you're incorporating the four thoughts to turn the mind to Dharma, into your daily practice. First of all, I think it's a good thing if these are new, because I know this is a video, and so there may be people watching this that aren't in the room. If you do decide this is something you want to incorporate, I think it's good to try to take some significant chunk of time on each of these, rather than trying to do all four in a day. I think it's a really good idea to like work with the precious human birth for a week, or if you really want to dive in a month or 2 weeks or 10 days or something, like really take some amount of time to inhabit each of these thoughts. Because when you do it for more than a day, then these things are more likely to pop up during your day, you know, in your applied practice rather than just your formal practice. And again, this is in a way these four thoughts that turn the mind are versions of the why. You know, these are all the why. These are why you want to be doing Dharma. And as long as we can be connected with our why, then motivation is a lot easier. I don't think I'm alone here in saying that, like, were I to always have organic motivation, I would have no problem in consistency in my practice, right? But if you have any issues of consistency in your practice, really, I can't say it's the only thing, but I think if I think about it, it probably is the only thing. But motivation is really where it's at, right? I mean, if you've got a real understanding of why you need to do something, you do it, you know? And that's like, I always like to use the example of brushing our teeth. You know, we know why we need to brush our teeth, and we might miss brushing our teeth, but very rarely do people choose not to brush their teeth. I mean, if you miss brushing your teeth, you forgot, you know, and you kind of freak out a little bit, right? Because you know people are gonna be like, you know, it's not a good situation. So deodorant is another thing like that, I think sometimes. So but yeah, so we want to try to connect with the why. And so this practice of the four thoughts fits into this scheme of Lojong practice after the Guru Yoga. We do the four thoughts. And you can also plug it into any practice. It's good to do towards the beginning of whatever your daily practice series is. And then to move on to whether it's shamatha, sitting meditation, or tong-len, or visualization. It's good to do the four thoughts at the beginning. A lot of practices start with the four thoughts as part of the text even. So we start with the precious human birth. And we could just contemplate the precious human birth. I think we all have some ways of tackling just that idea of this birth where we have access to these teachings in where we live in a world with a teacher who taught these teachings. We have access to those teachings, and we have a community that practices them. Like that's what makes this birth precious, rather than just like a regular human birth. And we can contemplate that, and that's totally fine. But I think to keep it interesting and engaging, and to really start to get to this from a lot of different angles, we have these idea of the 8 freedoms and the 10 resources. So we looked a little bit at this last time. Oops, I jumped ahead. And we have here, some of these are about the realms. So we might think, and even these can be broken down a little bit. So for instance, I saw the one about animals, number 3. Animals are dull and ignorant and did not understand or know anything. Seems a little harsh, but I mean, there's definitely, compared to us, there's some truth there. And like, I'll also think, when I think about animals, I also think a lot about fear, like, I mean, and it's not like this is only an experience of animals. When we talk about the realms, we can also always talk about how even in our life, we can seem to move within the realms in the space of a single day. There are times when we get really angry and we feel like in that moment we're born into a hell realm. Everything feels like it's out to hurt us. And similarly, we might be feeling like we have this poverty mentality and we just need more and more, and whatever we get, it's not enough. And in that amount of time, we're born into this hungry ghost realm. But like animals, for instance, like can you imagine just like always being afraid that like something might eat you? Like that's a amazing, I don't know how they do it, moving around, never knowing where your next meal is, always afraid there's a predator that's going to catch you. These are things we can contemplate. So like when we reflect on this idea of animals being dull and ignorant and not understanding or knowing anything, we could reflect on specifically what it says here, that like they're never going to understand the Dharma. They don't understand languages and concepts, and for that reason they can't learn the ways to help them shape their next birth or their future rebirths. And when we contemplate that a bit, at some point we recognize like, wow, I'm really fortunate not to be in that situation. And at that moment we resolve, I need to really practice Dharma, and I need to connect Dharma to everything in my life. And that's how that 3-step process plays out. And so any thoughts on any of this or these particular ones before we move on to the other ones? Yeah, Lisa.
For the animals, how do they get to a higher realm, being an animal, not being able to study Buddhism or anything?
Really hard, right? And so many of them have, like, if you think about cats, I'm a cat person. I think you have one in the room, right? Like they have to eat meat, right? Like there's just no getting around it, and it's so even and they're like the one level that's just below us. They're not the hell realm, but still like part of their existence is eating things, so I mean, so I guess my first answer is like, in this contemplation, and like just in terms of doing the 4 thoughts contemplation, like that's not really like we would just want to land on like, wow, that's terrible,
Okay.
But towards your question, I don't know that I have a clear answer for that. It's a really good question. But in terms of like, I'm trying to think of how to word this. We're trying to recognize. So we do the review so we can recognize. So what we're trying to recognize is that this is a precious human birth. So I'm glad you asked the question, because like it is easy to kind of get in that kind of thinking? And it's a good question, and I would ask a teacher that. That's a really good question. But I just
Okay.
want to be clear, like for this practice, like that would be something you would want to kind of come back from to the contemplation of like how that helps you recognize this precious human birth. But yeah, what do you think? That's a good question. What do you think?
Yeah. Sometimes I
How do
think
they?
they do I don't know, sometimes I feel like they do, I don't know, I feel like some hmm, some are like cats, they can make you feel better, like they're doing something for you.
Mhm.
So I feel like it's that like they get karma that way, good karma, and maybe eventually they'll work their way out.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also the scale issue. I mean, it's easy to kind of think of like how do they get from this life to a higher rebirth, but I think we also have to remember that there are these countless rebirths. So, and there's
Right.
always like different karmic seeds that can be actualized, and so they could very
Yeah.
well go straight from an animal realm to a god realm or something because of some previous seed.
Right. And
So
this is
it is.
part of the
It's never.
contemplation.
Hmm?
And this is part of the when you're thinking about precious human birth, it's part of the okay thought process.
Witches.
Oh, when you're
Sorry, I
thinking
didn't
about
know.
like things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, yeah, for the process, like I would be more on the like, how does this compare to my precious human birth tip?
Okay.
I'd be
Yeah.
more on the like, how does what this statement says compare to my birth? But just in terms of like, but in terms of like thinking about karma and rebirth and stuff, like
Mhm.
I think that kind of separate topic, it is interesting to think like we know that they won't always go to lower realms because they have this whole storehouse of karmic seeds, and
Right.
all it takes is like the right causes and conditions to activate one. And so they've got a little more hope than we might think, because
Yeah.
of that. But yes, it's definitely a lot an exponentially worse situation than ours.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. But it's good. I mean, it's funny because like this is really, I think this is the why I wanted to spend a little time on this too, because contemplation is tricky, right? Because like this gets into like our wanting to understand and figure out, and that's
Yeah.
useful. But like we really like with contemplative meditation, we're really kind of honing. We're using the contemplation as a tool, almost like as a knife to cut a certain thing. We want to make a precision cut. So like with this contemplative practice of the four thoughts, our cut is to recognize the truth of whatever thought we're working on, you know? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have the resources. We have, I think these are really interesting. The first one is really kind of saying we don't have the things that are the previous eight. You've been born in a country where the Dharma has spread. That's an easy one to understand. There's not a lot of places like that. Um, since your eyes and other faculties are intact, you can understand whatever you're taught. Since you do not have wrong views and have entered the fold of the Buddhist teachings, you do not have wrong livelihood. And you have faith since you trust in the three jewels that are the source of refuge. I have a little, I'm a little partial to the external resources. I think because they're so obvious. Many universes have been created or destroyed, but you've been born in one where a Buddha has appeared. Whole universes where there's no Buddha. The Buddha that appeared here actually taught the Dharma. That's not always the case. You may have a Buddha in your universe who didn't teach, you know? So we're in a universe that has a Buddha and that Buddha taught. And that Buddha taught like 2,600 years ago, but the teachings remain. They're still here. That's amazing. And it's an unbroken lineage. There are still many followers of the teaching. these things add up. It's like, wow, this is amazing. It's really amazing. Like, we are so fortunate. And Dharma practitioners are supported by other sentient beings who are sympathetic to them. That's how we can build new Dharma centers and things. Like, there are people who actually support it. And in a lot of more culturally Buddhist countries, I think there's even more of a sense of like people who identify as Buddhist as their main practice supporting the Dharma. They may not meditate per se, but they, as a practice, offer to support teachers and teachings. Oh, this one gets heavy. So the impermanence, the thought of impermanence. And for this, Genpopa offers the 5 root verses of the Kadampa school. And this one in particular, I think, is a good example of why we have to watch out for rumination, because this could get dark. And in a way, it should, but we don't want to let it kind of take us off track in terms of what we're trying to do, which is to recognize the truth of this thought, as opposed to end up in a hole of despair. So, for instance, we reflect that nothing lasts, that everything changes. Sometimes for that for me is just sitting on the cushion and thinking like, what if something happened where I'm in the hospital tomorrow? Have you ever been in a hospital? It's like, it's not easy to keep a routine. You're not sleeping well. Like, it's things like that happen, and that, especially for beginners like us, you know what I mean? Like, it can really upend your routine, So sometimes I think just like that, like just sitting on something as simple as sitting on the cushion with a text in front of me, something could happen that I can't do that tomorrow, So, but again, like, reflect. And then if that hits hard, if you're feeling that in your chest, that's the recognition. And then you take that and you go, boy, I really need to do this right now. I really need to practice Dharma with every spare moment, and then move on. So I want to highlight that, like, this process of review, reflect, review, recognize, resolve might take a little bit to get to the recognition phase, but it might not either, And so I think it's important, and this goes for tong-len too. I think it's really important to not extend this if it doesn't need to be. I think the pitfall with this and with tong-len is to kind of get wrapped up in your thoughts and get into a rumination cycle. So if you really feel like, wow, like all of a sudden you kind of recognize everything changes, like you hit recognition, time to move on to resolve. And then what do you do after you resolve to practice the Dharma? You do your practice. If it's shamatha, you do your shamatha. If it's tong-len, you do your tong-len. So it's not bad to have a quick practice of the 4 thoughts if it's a meaningful practice of the 4 thoughts. So you see number 2, contemplate the many others who have died. Contemplate the many causes of death. Sometimes I'll be just like drinking water and I'll think like, sometimes there's like people who just for some reason get some germ in the water and then they're dead, But like, luckily I have clean tap water, and I sure hope this glass of tap water is clean, who knows? So, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's amazing we've made it this far, of how many ways there are that we can die, It's funny, I just thought of in 1998 at the Fish concert at Polaris Amphitheater. After the concert, it was a great concert. I was walking down Shakedown Street and I saw like a sparkle in front of my face. And then I heard a bang on the ground. And my friend was like, "Did that just hit you in the face?" And I was like, "What?" And he said, "That bottle rocket." And I reached up and my face was bleeding. I got hit in the face with a bottle rocket, like right here. It had like just missed my eye. I could have like easily lost an eye. It could have exploded in my face, but it just boop and then hit the ground and exploded. I mean, that's not a life-threatening thing per se, but things like that happen all the time. And for some reason, I got because of the blessings of the lineage or the karma or whatever, like I didn't lose an eye. So, but those kind of things happen all the time. There are many, many ways that we can get hurt and things change and that we can die. So there's that one. Then contemplate what will happen at the time of death. And each of these should be very personal. So like contemplating what will happen at the time of death really kind of means like envisioning like, what would that be like if you knew you were dying, and you knew it was time, there you were, you know, you can kind of imagine it many different ways, but it's a very personal, direct contemplation. I think it's not something we frequently, envision, but we can, and it can be a very powerful way of recognizing the truth of impermanence. And then contemplate what happens after death. I think most of us have heard some stories about the Bardo and how terrifying and disconcerting it can be. But how have we really thought about that being our experience? Our only experience in that moment. There's no other choices. Like that's what we've got. So each of these 5 can be an extremely powerful contemplation of impermanence. Any thoughts on impermanence before we move on? In a lot of ways, this one's my favorite because it just feels so powerful to me.
I have a thought. I mean, I just have a comment. I just remember, back in the day practicing the 4 thoughts, and I would teach my kids when they were younger, and we would always go through impermanent. I would always talk about impermanence, and they would just say something would break or they would lose something, and they would just say like, well, if something broke, usually when they were little and it was something I really loved, they would say, well, it's impermanent. You said nothing lasts forever, so I broke it. It's impermanent. They'd always use that. They always would use it. And even to this day, they're older, but they still talk about just impermanence, no matter what happens, even in their life. It makes me feel like, wow, yeah, they really got it. I think about it every day. I'm always contemplating impermanence.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a great service for children, I think, to share that, especially at a young age, because it doesn't have to be awful. I mean, loss is always painful, but I think, the funny thing about impermanence is we also don't talk often enough about like upsides of impermanence too. That's not, I mean, I'm talking particularly about teaching kids, not necessarily about the 4 thoughts, but like that's another thing about like impermanence. Like that's what means like that we won't always be in this awful position we're in at this given moment or something. Impermanence is why we can enjoy music. You can't enjoy permanent music. It would be like one tone that lasts forever or something, no rhythm, like impermanent. A lot of what we love about the world is also this mechanism of impermanence. But in this context of the 4 thoughts, we are definitely talking about like not having time to practice Dharma and grow and evolve. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad that people share that stuff with children. So when we talk about karma, we talk about the 10 unvirtuous and the 10 virtuous actions. And this, again, is a great contemplation. So I think I found out about this section of the jewel ornament pretty long after I started doing the 4 thoughts. And this really kind of totally supercharged my practice, because you can only read so many commentaries about the 4 thoughts, until they all start to kind of sound the same. But when you can really get into like each of these as being its own contemplation, contemplating like that, killing is an unvirtuous action, and its opposite, the virtuous action, is saving and protecting life. And really kind of getting into that, questioning it, like really getting into the nuance of that question and how that works. Stealing versus giving generously. And it's funny too to even equate it, because for instance, with stealing and giving generously, I don't know that I would have ever thought of those 2 things as being like connected. I mean, I know stealing is bad, but like I don't think I ever thought about like or you could give generously, and that's actually like really positive version of a similar kind of fixation on the three spheres. I mean, if you're gonna believe that there is action and doer and done to, I forget that somebody gave me good words for that. I always feel like I'm using funny words when I do the three spheres, but it's basically like giver, receiver, and like the action of giving. So if you believe those, if you have the appearance of those three spheres and you want to work with it, then giving generously would be the great way to do it rather than taking for yourself. Number 3 is sexual misconduct. This one, I want to just comment because I think, there's a lot of texts that come from the monastic tradition that say things that refer to like what kinds of sexual acts are appropriate. And I think it's just important to note the context of those texts. And I like to always say that I think Taisitu Rinpoche or Barta Rinpoche, I can't remember which, said that really what we should take from this one is don't harm anyone with your sexual conduct. So I like, that's the way I think about sexual misconduct. But again, here's what's connected to it: maintaining discipline without hypocrisy. There's really a lot to contemplate there, Then when we get to speech, the actions of speech, we have lying versus speaking truthfully, divisive speech versus reconciling those divided by slander, harsh speech versus speaking gently, and idle chatter versus speaking purposefully. And just a couple of things off the top of my head about that. Harsh speech was a big one for me when I first started practicing. And there were a lot of things that I said that were just habit that I picked up probably in middle school or something, like I used to use the word hate a lot. Like I hate that, or, and I just remember for a while there, I started to think like, do I really hate vanilla ice cream? That's something I hate, and so I think one way to think about harsh speech is just like, it's kind of like that, when we say things like our language matters, and it may not, it may matter a little less how that language lands with us. I still think harsh language has an impact on us and our body. I think there's research that shows that now too. But I think the bigger deal is like, how does that language land with other people? Like someone just overhears you saying something like that. How does that land with them? How does that impact their day? Does it help them to progress on the path? So just working with the awareness of our speech is one practice of Dharma, I think, is just being aware of how we're saying things and trying to say things in a way that's mindful and compassionate. Speaking gently, as this says. And an idle chatter, I think, is another one versus speaking purposefully. And this is a tricky one, right? Because like, I think we're all in our culture expected to do some level of small talk. And I know like the times that like Rinpoche would come in to Columbus and I would always try to sign up to drive him, to be his driver. And I just remember particularly the first time, like being super nervous and him being like super kind and, just radiating love and compassion, but also being very quiet. And I remember I also had this experience, I think, with Lama Karma when he first came here too. And I remember like a practice of Dharma in the sense that like Dharma can illuminate our habits and illuminate our kleshas, our negative emotions, like that serene calmness of a realized teacher highlighted for me my fixation on speaking constantly. Like my just desire to just vomit words and ideas and elicit reactions and it just all became very apparent to me, like what a unfortunate tendency that was, and so balance is always the key, right? So this is not to say like never talk about the weather, but maybe you start to notice sometimes that like the urge to talk doesn't necessarily mean you have to talk, you know? And I think that one of the reasons why doing group sitting practice, I think is so wonderful is there's something very intimate about sitting quietly with other people. In a lot of ways, that's kind of the most intimate we can be with others around us, is to just share space, you know? That really is an amazing thing to do that's not common in our society. So I think that this idea of like avoiding idle chatter and trying to use our speech purposefully is a really good practice. And then we have covetousness versus rejoicing in others' prosperity, malice versus maintaining an altruistic attitude, and wrong views or not criticizing other religions and always believing the words of the Buddha. This is something I know Rinpoche has mentioned. I think I've heard this in the context of refuge ceremonies, because a lot of times we'll talk about this as one of the vows in the refuge ceremony. The idea that like, it's because I think one of the things that is advised in the refuge ceremony, one of the vows, that there's 3 groups of 3, and one of them is like to not befriend non-Buddhists. Or one of the translations says it that way. And I think there's always questions about that because we're not in a highly Buddhist country. So it kind of sounds like, oh, you can't have any friends anymore. But the idea is really like, don't be friends with people who do things that run contrary to the Dharma, I think is a good way to think of that. And so what we can do is simply not criticize other religions and ourselves always believe in the words of the Buddha, you know? So it's kind of I think it's a very graceful way of navigating that. And then last we have the defects of samsara, and there's a lot here. But in short, we're contemplating birth, aging, illness, and death. And then a second group of 4, which is not getting what we seek, fear of losing what we have, being separated from what is dear, and encountering what we do not want. And each of these subgroups is also really pretty amazing. Illness really struck me. Physical and mental discomfort increases. The body naturally changes. These 2 really get me. There's no ability to enjoy pleasant things. So I was noticing earlier this week when I was feeling more sick, I was like talking to somebody that I know, an old friend, and I was very happy to be talking to them, but I just couldn't be happy in the moment. And I wasn't like deathly ill, but it was enough uncomfortableness for it not to be pleasant, a situation that really should be, you know, and I really wanted it to be. And it just wasn't in that moment pleasant. And then similarly, being forced to rely on unpleasant things, like to get by. So, so to bring this back to the example, so we may think about that and recognize there's no ability to enjoy pleasant things. We may be alive. There may be people around us who love us, and they may be doing things to care for us, but those pleasant things are not landing as pleasant because of our sickness, you know. And we recognize, like, wow, this is samsara is not all it's cracked up to be. You know, this is a major defect. I don't want to keep trying to hang out here, you know, in this cycle. You know, I really need to do dharma. I really need to practice dharma. I need to figure out how, not just to do my Buddhist religious practice, but to connect with deep meaning in everything I do in my day, you know, and connect that with hopefully my bodhisattva aspiration, you know, to benefit all beings. So we'll stop there. Any thoughts or questions on that? I'm curious if any of that stuff in particular was like new or resonated in a unique way.
It's I'll have a comment. It's always new every time. I don't know, every time you do it, it's just, I don't know, it's new. Even though I've heard it before, it's never the same. Yeah. So it helps.
Yeah. Good, good. And so yeah, this contemplation companion, I keep it folded. I give it a trifold, and it sits in my Lojong text. Or I'm sorry, it sits in my Nundro text. So like when I do my Nundro, this is just there. And when I open my Nundro text and I pop it open, and this is how I do my four thoughts practice, you know. I think it's perfectly fine to just chant the line, briefly contemplate her precious human birth and move on. But if you've got a little time and you want to dig in, this is a great way to do it. And I want to highlight once again that, like, if you are struggling with any of your practice, this is a great thing to devote a little more time to. That's exactly what this is for. This is for generating organic motivation. Yeah. No other thoughts? It's a heavy one. Next time we'll get into ultimate bodhicitta practice, the first associated practice of ultimate bodhicitta in the Lojong. This is the part that I had mentioned that I appreciate people waiting to read until we go through it together, because it's some heavy duty stuff, fascinating, really cool practice. But we'll go into that next week. And I just want to, before we do that, I'm going to share one more thing here before we do the dedication, which is this quote from the beginning. I'll share this again next week too. But just because I feel like this is a place where all of us get confused again and again. True ultimate bodhicitta will not arise in the course of experience of beginners, but relative bodhicitta will definitely arise if they train in it. With the development of relative bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta will be realized naturally. So next time around, we'll go through the ultimate bodhicitta practice. But this is what we got to remember, because the thing about ultimate bodhicitta is we're going to get an urge to try to conceptually figure it out. You know, that's our habit. But that doesn't work. And so, like, oftentimes, like, it's just again and again coming back to this idea of, like, you know, I'm not understanding it. And it's like, well, you can't. It's not like anything else. We can't just understand it. We have to experience. It's an experience, or something. Like, we might use the verb like see. It's something you see or experience. So true ultimate bodhicitta will not arise in the course of experience of beginners, but relative bodhicitta will definitely arise if they train in it. And relative bodhicitta is what we cultivate through tong-len. So if we're doing tong-len, we will develop relative bodhicitta, and then ultimate bodhicitta will be realized naturally, so effortlessly. And I think that's really important. So let's chant the dedication together. We'll do 2 stanzas here. By this merit, may all beings obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood and defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may we free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Okay. Thank you, KTC SoCal.
Yeah, thank you, Lama Adam. That was
I like it.
Yeah, it
Thank you,
sounds good.
Lama
Got a
Adam.
good ring to that name.
I know.
Sounds good.
So
Powerful ring. So contemplate that every day, everybody.
All right,
We're
thank
about
you. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Feel
Have a good
better.
night.
Feel better. Okay, good night.
Oh, good night, guys.
Night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. You're still there. There you are.